So I'm just curious, as you greeted each other this morning, what were the bodies of water that were kind of spiritual, hypnotizing? Waterfalls? Rivers? The Irish Sea. What was that? Niagara Falls. Wow, yeah. Makes me need to go to the bathroom just thinking of that. What did you say? A farm pond. Yeah. Oceans in general. Anybody like a rainstorm? Just hearing a rain come down, or standing by the side of a lake, or somebody told me in the first service that pools, they don't really like being out in big bodies of water, but they were a swimmer, and so when they got in the water in the pool, it just was a very calming and kind of a beautiful thing for them. It's interesting when we think about water and bodies of water, we tend to think immediately of it's a gulf or a lake or an ocean or a pond or a large river or something like that. But really, the thing is with water in this earth of ours is that it's everywhere. I mean, when you think of bodies of water, there are tiny little molecular particulates of water, right, that we're literally breathing in right now, that surround us, that we're breathing out. Water is everywhere, and in fact, if we wanted to think about it, we could think of this earth that we're on as a big drop of water itself. I mean, right? They call it the pale blue dot for a reason. It's blue because it's 70% covered with water, whether it's ocean or freshwater or ice caps, and where you see white, right? That's vapor, that's water in another form. So in a way, you could say that we are surrounded by these bodies of water, but literally we exist on this big drop of water that's floating in space on these continental particulates that happen to be, kind of interspersed among this water. And then if you think about the way that water is always moving around us, so even as we sit here, water is coursing through our veins and our bodies, right? We're breathing water in and out. Water is moving underneath the earth. Water sometimes is falling from the sky. Water is always evaporating back up into the sky, right? Water is everywhere and always around us. And as Shelley said a little bit ago, another way to think about a body of water is to think about the literal body that you're in right now. And the graph that we have is, basically, the older we get, the drier we get. Sorry about that. But little kids, 75% water. We're water creatures. We would be dead without it pretty quickly, right? Water is in everything and around everything and through everything, and water is a source of life and hydration and cleanliness, right? And there's something about us when you stand at the edge of a lake or an ocean or you listen to a rainstorm, there's something about us that deeply resonates with water as just a spiritual thing in and of itself, a physical thing that kind of translates over into that, blurs the lines between physical and spiritual. And part of that might come from the fact that most, evolutionary theorists and biologists would say that we are evolved from some sort of sea creature, whether it was 300 million years ago. I think they say it was the first time that amphibians kind of crawled out of the sea and began that evolutionary process 300 million years ago. And so you can kind of look at images of human fetuses, and you can see where perhaps like our lungs and parts of our neck and our Adam's apple look like gills. Some people think that we still kind of have got signs of our fish life within us even in today. As I was reading about this, waters and bodies of water and our bodies and how much we depend on water, I read of another theory. I don't know if you've heard this one before. I find it fascinating. And this is not 300 million years ago, but 5 million years ago. Theorists like Elaine Morgan and David Attenborough, who are evolutionary theorists and biologists, put forward the idea that is gaining more and more acceptance that we as humans evolved from aquatic apes. So apparently there is this, clear understanding that there were the apes that lived in the trees, and somehow they made their way into the savannas of Africa. But apparently among evolutionary theorists and biologists, there's an understanding that there was a gap in there somewhere, and we're not quite sure exactly how that transition happened. But if you look at us today, our closest biological relatives would be chimpanzees and bonobos in the ape family. Genetically, we're very close, but obviously we're still very, very different. And what aquatic ape theorists say is that there was a group of these apes who moved to the coasts of Africa and lived in the tidal basins for various reasons. For safety, because it was an easy place to stay safe. there was plenty of food, and there was greens to eat, there was fish to eat, and that these aquatic apes that began to live in this tidal area began, evolutionary-wise, to lose their hair, because hair doesn't serve you very well when you've got to be diving underwater. It mats you down and weighs you down. So there's a reason why we are naked apes, they say. There's a reason why, of all the primate babies, if you took a human baby and you dropped it in water, do you know what that baby does? Holds its what? Holds its breath. No other primate does that. No other primate can control their breath like we can. We know how to hold our breath for certain periods of time. Unlike just about any other animals, we can hold our breath for as long as we want or as little as we want. We can control our breath. Most animals just breathe in and out. Same with monkeys. You put them underwater, they breathe in and they start drinking water pretty quickly. Other reason, so the only other animals that I learned in this, I'll biologically geek out here for a while. The only other animals that can control their breath like that, do you know why they have learned to control their breath? Is because they are diving animals. They know how to dive for food. And so aquatic ape theorists would say that one of the things we did as naked apes living in the tidal basins is we learned how to dive for food. And we know that there are humans today that can hold their breath up to 5-10 minutes who still dive for pearls and such. And the streamlined nature of our body helps us to move through the water in that regard. The only time, apparently, that primates, that apes and monkeys, walk consistently on 2 feet, most of the time they still walk on 4 feet. The only time they walk consistently for great distances on 2 feet is when they are crossing a river. And they have to keep their breathing apparatus above water. And so after thousands and thousands of years, it could be that these aquatic apes learned how to, the best became those who were best equipped to walk on 2 feet. Bipedal hominids were the ones that evolved to be the dominant part of the species. We also are good at floating. Have you noticed that? At least most of us are. The reason we can float so well in water is, again, unlike any other primate and most other mammals, we have a layer of fat under our skin all over our bodies. One of the reasons humans can get very, very large is because we have the capacity to get very, very large. Most animals only collect fat in certain parts of their body. The only other animals that have a fat layer under their skin are, guess, whales and seals, right? Isn't that fascinating? Now, you don't have to believe it. That's okay. I just heard this like last week for the first time. But it seems to resonate. I don't know about you. I mean, some of us have a fear of swimming, and I don't mean to freak you out, and if water's not a good thing for you. But for a lot of us, just being in water, floating in water, there's something about it. And maybe it has to do with the first 9 months of our lives when each one of us floated in a sack of water and we're these aquatic little apes that grew and then came out the birth canal and began this process being 75% water in this land of ours floating on this body of water in space. There's a reason why I think, as Scripture says it, that deep calls to deep. The deep longings in ourselves call to the deep of the earth. There is a spiritual and physical translation that happens very easily between the spirit and water. Throughout the Scriptures and throughout our faith tradition, water is used over and over again as a sign of the Spirit. Whether it's in cleansing or it's in baptizing or it's in bathing, whatever it is, the Spirit is often synonymous with water. It quenches our thirst. It cleans us. It refreshes us. It's always there. It's always moving. And you always need to take new doses of it in. You can't just get one drink of water once a week, right? You can't just get one dose of the Spirit of God once a week. It's something that you need to do throughout the day, throughout the week, so that you can stay feeling clean and refreshed and enlivened. One of my favorite scriptures, a passage that I put in the bulletin for this morning, is Psalm 63. And the psalmist uses the imagery of water when talking about the Spirit of God in a lot of places, but this passage really spoke to me when I was in middle school, and I was just old enough that I shouldn't have been scared in the middle of the night when I woke up from a nightmare or I heard something, but I was young enough that I still was. And I remember one night being in my bed, and I had my confirmation Bible, or one of the Bibles that somehow I had gotten, was on the desk next to me for some reason. And I was in my bed, and I woke up in the middle of the night, and the night before, I had been out with friends, playing, running, and probably eating way too many potato chips and stuff. And as many kids do, I hadn't drank enough. And so I woke in the middle of the night, frightened by a nightmare. I was scared, but I didn't want to go to my parents' room, and I was thirsty. And I was kind of panicking. I had a little panic attack, 7th grade, 8th grade panic attack. I'm sitting there in my bed. What should I do? I said, oh, God, help me. And I remember grabbing my Bible, and I opened it up, said, God, I need to know you're with me. And I opened my Bible to Psalm 63. And Psalm 63, I want to actually read it from the Bible. It says this. O God, you are my God, and earnestly I seek you. I search for you. My whole being thirsts for you. Can you imagine being an 8th grader and reading this in the middle of the night? My body desires you in a dry and tired land where there is no water anywhere. God, I have seen you in the sanctuary. I have beheld your power and your glory. My lips will praise you because of your faithful love. It is better than life itself, and so I will bless you as long as I'm alive. I lift up my hands in your name. I am fully satisfied. As with a rich dinner, my mouth speaks praise with joy on my lips. Whenever I ponder you on my bed, whenever I meditate on you in the middle of the night, because you've been a help to me, and so I shout for joy in the protection of your wings. It's what we were made to do. You know, one of our earliest confessions says that humans were made to love God, to glorify God forever. We were made in our beings and our bodies to need water. We were also made as spiritual creatures to need to be in connection with our spiritual God, our Maker, and to have that part of us filled up, that thirst of ours quenched on a regular basis, because if it's not, then pretty quickly we can grow fairly dry and fairly cynical and a little bit crotchety, right? A little bit anxious, a little bit mean. Has that ever happened to you, where you go a little bit too far between kind of soaking up the Spirit, connecting with what makes you the best part of yourself? Just like a glass of water, we need to have that Spirit that practice, those ways that we connect with the Spirit, that we practice throughout the day, we practice throughout the night, that allows us to remain hydrated, that allows us to feel clean in connection with God. It is a deep and physical and spiritual need that each one of us carries around. Each one of us are spiritual aquatic apes, whether we want to admit it or not. Spirituality, the Spirit and water, they go together. They just do, and it works so well together. Do you guys remember one of the first songs? One of the first songs I learned in church was, I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. Anyone know this one? I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. That's nice. We didn't even practice that. I've got love like an ocean. I could keep going. I mean, we write songs about it. It's in the hymns. It's in the spirituals. It's in the scriptures for a reason. Because water and Spirit share so much in common. Our souls, our bodies beg for it and need it. And so God reminds us on a regular basis in places like Isaiah 55, where God says, those who seek the Lord come to me and drink, God says. John 7, that Jason read from our call to worship this morning, Jesus says, let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. That's where you're going to quench your thirst. That thirst that you have that you can't quite quench will come to me and drink. And Jesus says, anyone who is thirsty that comes to me and drinks and believes in me, rivers of living water will flow within them. And then John 4, that passage where Jesus meets with the Samaritan woman at the well, and they're talking about water, and Jesus says, I have living water, and she wants to know what he's talking about. And he says, if the water that you're looking for can be found in me, I am the true water of life that you seek. We need it. We're made for it. And so the question is, how do we do it? How do we soak it in? Because if we wait just till, once a week for a time to kind of fill up on the Spirit or connect with God, I got to tell you, folks, I hope that works for you. I hope you've kind of got a camel spirit. But I think just the same way we are with water, and those of us who've learned to carry water bottles throughout the day, the more we connect with God and connect with the Spirit through whatever habit or ritual it is that we have, or just a time to breathe or to stop or to look up or whatever it is, the more often we can do that, the same way, the more often you learn how to drink from a water bottle that you carry around from yourself, you find yourself being a little more thirsty. Has that ever happened to you? About 20 years ago, none of us walked around with water bottles. And now everyone seems to, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing. The more we practice little spiritual practices that cause us to stop and to connect with God, to connect with the Spirit of Christ, the more we can find ways to do that, the more we will want to do that. But we leak. And so just because you fill up in the morning doesn't mean you don't have to fill up again by the night, or just because you fill up on Sunday doesn't mean that you got to spend some time filling up again on Monday. And each one of us finds different ways to do that, and that's okay. Sometimes I talk to people and they say, well, Paul, the whole praying thing, that's not for me, getting up early in the morning, getting on my knees, praying thing. And I want to say, I don't pray like that. And I think most people don't get up in the morning and get on their knees. If you do, that's fantastic. But we tend to think that there's kind of a one way to practice spirituality, one way to connect with God. And I want to tell you that's not the case at all. Each one of you are all wonderfully and uniquely made. And each one of our bodies and our souls and our spirits are made to connect with God in new ways and different ways. What you need to do is get enough in touch with yourself to know, what is it that feeds my soul? How is it that I connect with God? How is it that I moisturize my soul with the presence of Jesus? Because if I don't on a regular basis, friends, I want to tell you, we get dry pretty quickly. And all of us have been around dried up people. Dried up people aren't the funnest people to be around. People who get a little too crusty and a little bit too cynical and who tend to wear a frown more than they wear a smile. Those aren't the kind of people we want to be. We want to be the kind of people that fill up with the Spirit, the life-giving Spirit, on a regular basis so that we are nourished and moisturized, and we can be that moisturizing, nourishing presence to others. We can cup our hands in such a way that we can share the life-giving water with others. But we're all going to do it differently, and my challenge to you this fall is to get back in touch with it. What is it that you know connects you to the Spirit on a regular basis? And see if you can make a commitment this fall to figure out a new way to establish that habit on a regular basis. For your sake, for the sake of your spouse and your neighbors and your friends and this world, we friends, in our own way, here are the watering hole of Christ. We come, all of us, in our weird shapes and sizes, whether you're a giraffe or you're a whatever. We all gather here and we drink from the water of Jesus. But then as we go forward from this place, each one of us can be little watering holes for others. If we stay filled up, we can do that. We can give a smile to another person. We can give a word of encouragement to another person. We can extend a little bit of patience when we don't think we really have it. But that comes from us regularly tending to our spirits. And all of us are going to do that in different ways. So don't discount yourself because you're not like other spiritual people. You are a spiritual person, a deeply spiritual person to your core, to your bones. Find out, remind yourself, because I'm sure you already know, remind yourself how it is that you drink regularly from the Spirit. And make a new commitment to do that. So I'm gonna geek out on you biologically again for just a little bit, because just to prove to you, there's all sorts of ways that we can gather the Spirit and gather water. I want to share with you a couple of critters that I learned about. So this first one is called a male sand grouse. This is a male sand grouse. I love it that it's a male sand grouse. When a male sand grouse and his spouse have babies, what the male sand grouse starts to do every morning is he goes and finds a little puddle of water and sits in it and just waddles around like this for like 5 or 10 minutes, and then slowly walks back to the nest, because the feathers on his back are different than the feathers on his belly. The feathers on his belly are absorbent, like little sponges. Slowly waddles back to the nest, and the baby chicks suck the water from the feathers of Dad's belly. Isn't that a cool way? I mean, maybe you just need to find a little puddle to waddle around in. I don't know. I could see Dave Jeter just kind of moisturizing in some spiritual puddle, and then you walk around and other people can just kind of feed off your drips. I mean, it's fantastic. The Namibian desert beetle has a complex microsculpture on its exoskeleton. It lives in the driest and hottest places in the earth. And yet, even in the driest and hottest places of the earth, because some of us feel like we live there spiritually sometimes, a fog or a dew will come some mornings or a couple of times a month. And this beetle, what it does is it's got tiny little things on its exoskeleton that stick out, just little, not webs, but similar to that. And it positions itself in such a way that it catches the moisture in the air and it sticks his butt up in the air like that, so that once those water droplets get full enough, they roll down into its mouth. And it collects water out of the air. Isn't that fantastic? Maybe that's you. Maybe you're the kind of person that just needs to get outside and go for a run, or just stand in your backyard with your arms open wide and just suck in the Spirit. What do you need to do to draw the life-giving Spirit of God so that you are not a dry person? I remember one of the saddest conversations I had was with an elderly man who knew that death was coming soon, and one of the things he said to me, and he was not the nicest of guys, and he said, "I fear that before my funeral, I've already died." None of us want to be that person. But it takes a daily dose, regularly soaking it up. There's this other creature that we all know about, the butterfly, that's beautiful, but if you look closely at it, it's kind of creepy because it's got a super long nose called a proboscis that it uses to, of course, suck nectar. It's another way that animals get water. This is another cute little creature. Do you know what this one is? That is a baby vampire bat. So there's other creatures, however, like vampire bats or mosquitoes, that use their teeth or their very strong proboscis to actually get on other living creatures, and they pierce the exoskeleton or pierce the skin of another creature, and they draw the life and the spirit out of that other creature, to the point where that other creature becomes irritated or sick or can even die. Then there's the animals, of course, that sadly find themselves drinking from water that's been contaminated, and as much as they try to drink to quench their thirst, either slowly or quickly, they're poisoning themselves. We all dry up and die without water. We all dry up and start to die without the Spirit. And so we will get it. We will figure out how to get water somewhere, or we will figure out how to draw the living Spirit of God somehow. And if we can't get the living Spirit of God, we will find other ways to get filled up. And we know whether we're being filled up in positive ways and life-giving ways, or we know when we're trying to fill ourselves up in ways that aren't so positive. One of the things that I've realized for myself, and I tell other people, is that one of the ways for you to continue to contain life and spirit within yourself is to make sure you're filling up on a regular basis. But the other thing that you need to do is, there are people or practices, sometimes even parts of our jobs, that suck the life out of us. There are certain people that have a way of piercing our exoskeletons and sucking the life out of us. Do you guys know these people? I found this slide on Facebook a couple weeks ago. I thought it was great. Sometimes, sadly, we find ourselves continuing to go back to people who take life from us. We can become addicted to the very things, whether it's relationships or it's practices or it's habits or it's materialism or whatever it is, and we can become addicted to habits that actually poison us and take life from us. So one of the ways we can make sure we stay filled with the life-giving Spirit of God is proactive in making space for yourself to connect with the Spirit on a regular basis. And part of it is reactive. Sometimes you just need to say, I can't spend time with that person anymore. I'm never going to save that person. I am not that person's Jesus. And the more I spend time with that person, the more I spend time in that situation, the more I spend time doing that thing, I am slowly poisoning myself, and I'm not good for me or for anyone else. What are you doing in your life to ensure that you are filled with the Spirit and remain filled with the Spirit so that you can be a life-giving source of that Spirit for others? The prophet Jeremiah speaks for God in a powerful way, and speaking through Jeremiah, God sums up our human struggles like this. God says, "My people commit two sins. One, they have forsaken me, the fountain of living water. And two, they have hewn cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that do not hold water." What are the broken cisterns in your life? You probably know what they are. What are the sources of life and rest and peace and nourishment in your life? You probably know what they are. And what can you do this fall, both proactively and perhaps reactively, to put yourself in a place so that you as a child of God, the aquatic ape that you are, can spend more time filled with the life-giving water of Christ, so that you can be a source of life for others? Jesus says, if anyone is thirsty, if anybody is thirsty, come to me. Come to me and drink. This morning, I want to invite you, as we sing our reflective hymn, to do what you need to do to reconnect with God. Maybe make some little commitments this fall as to how you will reactively or proactively find ways to fill up the water, the Spirit of your life on a regular basis in a tangible way, to reconnect yourself with the life-giving force that all of us long for and were made for, to remember the Spirit of God that is always around you, always available, so that we don't have to go through life being parched or feeling dirty. We can remember that we are clean, that we are forgiven, that we are full of life and love. Jesus says, "Come to me and drink." So as we sing this song, I thought it might be interesting to have a couple of ways for us to just practically work this out. So we've got, right over here, there's a bowl of water and some towels. If you would like to come forward and just touch the water and say a prayer, or even splash some water on your face or your hands, and there's some towel there, and you just want to say a prayer and use that as a way to kind of connect with water and to say something to God or yourself. Obviously the interesting thing about our faith is that, on a regular basis, we take water, just regular water, and we pour it in the middle of worship. And we splash it on babies and on people because we recognize water as a symbol of the Spirit that cleanses us and marks us as God's own beloved children. So if you'd like to come forward and just touch the baptismal waters and remember your baptism, that'd be great. I'm also going to be standing here, and if you'd like me just to say a word of blessing over you and to put the sign of the cross with water on your forehead, I would be honored to do that. We've got glasses of water up here. If you just want to come and pour a glass and take a drink and say a prayer, and then maybe share a glass with somebody else, you can do that. There's also ice. If you'd rather just crunch a piece of ice, you could do that as well. So there's water here. There's not a ton of water, so don't fill the glass all the way up, but just take a little bit. And then over here, Shelley was good enough to leave us a spray bottles. If you just want to spray somebody next to you and just feel the mist of the Spirit on your face, and remember the little bodies of water, the little Spirit that you breathe in all throughout the day, do that and say a prayer. So friends, as we sing, I think Alex has got some water sounds that he's going to play. And as the choir sings, I invite you to stay where you are if you need to. Just sit and kind of talk to God a little bit. But let's find ways to reconnect and recommit ourselves to the Spirit of Christ.